It is the year 2115, and Japan has become the 17th Far East Imperial City Management District, where special rankings are assigned to individuals based on their genetic code and social standing. Our main protagonist, Toru Kazusumi, who is a rank D, prefers to stay below the radar, saying he does not mind being a sheep. One day, he awakens from a bad dream about his sister, and on the way to school with his friend Kyoka Katagiri, they see a crime scene of a man who presumably disappeared due to desert syndrome, or without thinking turning into sand. They meet with Kyoka's brother, called Kiyoma, a tall pompadour-clad man who dislikes Toru and his maid-slash-bodyguard, the short but fierce Shizune Rindu. At school, they compete in a gunfighting exercise with Kyoka winning the girls' block. Not wanting to attract attention, Toru allows Kiyoma to win, but the latter, sensing Toru is holding back, is greatly annoyed. On the way home from school, Toru shares the dream he had about his sister with Kyoka and sees a vision of her on the road, so he chases after her. On the ground where she was, they notice she drew "Help me" using chalk with complex mathematical equations in the background. Toru continues to give chase throughout the alleyways and crosses a police line. He enters a ruined part of the city and sees the girl run into a factory. He chases her above the scaffolding, but as she runs towards him she disappears, and the platform below him gives way, making him fall into the vat below. He then miraculously ends up in the year 2015, where other gunslinger individuals notice his fall from above. Kyoka follows him soon after, and they carefully make their way through an abandoned building, noting its age. They find a gunslinger who has been shot, and Toru takes his weapon. Suddenly, they're shot at by some unknown assailants, and they try to fight back with their own training guns from school, but no damage is dealt. Kyoka is soon pushed back and falls off the building. However, she is able to cling onto a steel bar. The assailant walks over to her, but his attention is caught by Toru. Now using a real gun from the fallen gunslinger, Toru threatens the assailant. However, he turns to Toru saying he is too late. Toru is horrified to see that he is staring at another him, and he is shot. He dodges the bullet just in time as his brain scrambles for an explanation as to what is going on. However, the Shadow Toru is called to retreat and he leaves. Meanwhile, Kyoka is saved by a fellow schoolmate, first-year Remy Audner, using his psychic powers to keep her from falling. Kyoka and Toru suspect they are in old management district once called Japan, which Remy confirms. Remy brings the two of them back to an advanced facility where they meet Brian Audner, the supervisor. He explains that the lab is publicly called the Melchizedek Corporation, but in truth, they are fighting to save the world against a parallel universe made up of individuals who are their parallel selves. Suddenly, Kiyoma, Shizune, and their instructor Olga Janitine also enter the room, revealing that they are aware of this truth. Brian confirms that desert syndrome is real and the government has been working hard to cover up this truth. 2 years ago, they were contacted by individuals known as timekeepers who informed them that their world would soon come to an end, the desert syndrome being a symptom of that fact. They provided advanced information who would disappear and when, greatly aiding their cover-up efforts. In addition to this information, the timekeepers said that they would provide the technology necessary to save their world, but only to those victorious in battle. In this case, they would have to defeat their parallel selves. Brian shows them another piece of technology provided by the timekeepers, a time machine. With the time machine, they can time travel qualified individuals and call them back at will. He also shows them another piece of technology called a time cube, stored with massive amounts of energy with which they can augment their weaponry with. Toru and Kyoka are each given a case containing a gun, and if they open it, it means they accept their role as a combatant or a gunslinger in the coming battles. Later, Olga shows Toru a live video of a degradation which sickens him, but Olga is chased away by Shizune. Toru is unsure of the responsibility thrust upon him, but Shizune says that he should ultimately do what he wants to do, as this should not personally concern him. He later meets with Kyoka and shares the story of how his parents were killed in a car accident. At home, he eventually decides to fight, opening the gunslinger case and confirming his participation in the battle. Kiyoma picks up Toru and takes him to school, questioning his motives. Toru replies his motives are to save a girl, and Kiyoma shows him pictures of the girl he was chasing. He explains that these are ghosts, remnants of people that sometimes appear on the battlefield. They arrive at the school and Toru heads for the training facility by himself. He receives his combat uniform capable of manipulating gravity, allowing high-speed movements, and protects any strong impacts. He meets Aaron Burroughs, whom Toru recognizes as the gunslinger that was killed the other day. They enter the training facility where they see Kyoka in a gunslinging spar with Remy. Their training proceeds well over the next few days, but during an exercise a mishap causes Remy to accidentally hurl rocks towards the downed Toru and Shizune, and Toru learns he has an ability that allows him to react to things as though they were in slow motion as he saves Shizune. Brian asks Kiyoma if he is sure about Kyoka joining the battle, but he replies that this is something she decided for herself and he trusts in Shizune to watch over her. An alert from the timekeepers signals them to assemble for the next battle, and they are transported to the year 2015. They battle their parallel selves, all of whom use similar weapons. Toru uses dual pistols, Kiyoma uses a chain gun, Kyoka uses a machine gun, Shizune uses a Kimbo Uzis. However, Toru senses the ghost girl is nearby and Kiyoma allows him 2 minutes to look for her while they deal with their enemies. When Toru finally finds the girl, she warns him that time will soon end but that the future has not been determined yet, which Remy overhears. Toru gets an alert that his team is pinned down, and realizing the selfishness of his decision, he races back to the battlefield. He sees Shadow Toru about to fire at Kiyoma and tries to warn him, however Shizune is fatally shot while defending Kiyoma instead. The group returns, distraught over the death of Shizune, but not before she is able to suicide bomb Shadow Kiyoma. Toru blames himself for the death of Shizune, but Kiyoma rebukes him, saying not to let her death be in vain. Later they receive an energy cube from the timekeepers as a reward for the previous battle. Kiyoma mourns Shizune by having tea alone with her as she promised, while Kyoka and Toru share in each other's grief. They then receive an alert for their next objective, that is to reach a specified point on the map which will earn them a huge sum of energy cubes. Toru volunteers himself as he has the greatest evasion rating amongst the entire unit. Kiyoma doubts Toru's ability and tries to shoot him, but when he dodges the bullet at point blank range he lets him go. While being transported to the battlefield, Toru tells Kiyoma that ever since his parents died, he never thought he'd ever experience the death of a loved one ever again, and swears to fight for Shizune's sake, which Kiyoma is grateful for. Their plan is to have the rest of their unit distract their parallel selves long enough for Toru to gain leeway to make it to the target point. However, Toru is intercepted by his parallel self, while the parallel Shizune and Olga mutually shoot and kill each other. Meanwhile, Kyoka and Remy are pinned down by parallel Kyoka, but the equilibrium is broken when the parallel Kyoka fires off a high explosive round, stunning Remy and forcing a one-on-one fight between the two Kyokas. Kiyoma appears to support Toru, allowing him to race to the top of the point right behind the parallel Toru. Atop the tower they race towards the objective point, but it appears as though they reach it at the same time, the winner unknown. Toru and his counterpart are transported into a narrow hallway where they have a brief firefight, but the timekeepers inform them that any further combat would be against the rules. They then open a door to reveal the reward, but Toru is shocked to see Shizune. However, in reality it is a timekeeper using Shizune's body as a way to communicate. It gives them both energy cubes as they entered the target point at the same time. When Toru asks the timekeepers what they are exactly, they explain that they are from the future and they have come to save the planet. 10 years from 2015, both their worlds will develop the technology to travel between their worlds, which will eventually lead into an interdimensional war that will result in the destruction of both their planets. The simplicity of this fact leaves Toru in disbelief, but his parallel self says that it is regrettably that simple. How can you care about the lives of others when you yourself are starving? The timekeeper brings them into a room and shows them videos of the destruction their war would have, and that the degradation phenomenon they experience is because their worlds have no futures. They say the solution is simple. If the existence of both worlds would result in their mutual destruction, then the logical course of action is to have one of the worlds be destroyed. The battles they undertake is to decide which world is to be spared and which world is to be destroyed. The timekeeper further explains that the year 2015 was chosen because from a quantum standpoint, it is equidistant to both their worlds, making it the fairest battleground. Toru finds the whole idea unacceptable and says there must be a way to avert the conflict without playing this death game. But his parallel self calls him naive and shoots him, however Toru swiftly dodges it. The timekeeper restrains them both, reminding them that the game had already ended, and transports them to an unknown time and place. Meanwhile, the rest of the group outside decides to retreat, but they are still under heavy fire from their parallel selves. Remy fights the parallel Lyudmila Ignatova and is initially overpowered by her superior armaments and energy cube upgrades, but he lures her underneath a building, fooling her tracking equipment, and crushes her underneath it. Kiyoma and Kyoka both fend off the parallel Kyoka and Ryo, but the other side's numerical advantage forces them to retreat, where they link up with Mondo Make, a mafia man dual-wielding Tommy guns, but he is injured before he makes it to the transport point. He accepts his fate and continues to fire back, so Kiyoma and Kyoka are forced to leave him behind. Toru awakens in what appears to be the ruins of Japan, but he soon learns it is the parallel world. He is taken in by the parallel Kyoka, who is actually friendly toward him. She tells him that if were not for the forced battles she'd hate to kill anyone, but says that her Toru would not hesitate to kill him on the spot. In this parallel world, Japan is in ruins, with what little fragments of society remaining taking up residence in abandoned buildings. The high tides also often flood the streets, leading to the construction of a vast network of bridge systems for travel. She takes him around the ruined city where she suspects that her Toru was likely sent to Toru's home world. She explains that 100 years ago the country that was once known as Japan succumbed to a series of earthquakes and war, and now is made up of isolated pockets of self-sufficient villages collectively known as the frontier. When Toru comments that everyone around him looks happy, she brings him to a local cemetery where their world's Remy is laid to rest after succumbing to an illness 3 years ago. The death deeply affected Toru, who arrived with the medicine too late. Soon after, he became jaded and apathetic. She says that life is difficult here for orphans, but after the battles started, they began receiving support and medical supplies. He thanks her for sharing her experiences and he wishes he could stay by her side longer, to which she replies that is something he should be saying to his Kyoka. The head of support Minakata Kumi finally locates Toru and forcibly extracts him. Parallel Kyoka bids him farewell and that the next time they meet it will be as enemies. Meanwhile, the parallel Toru investigates the Melchizedek laboratories where he finds a data bank, and is shocked to see that the Remy in this world had survived. Kyoka enters the room where parallel Toru is and he aims his gun at her just as Toru is teleported back. He fires back at his parallel self, but the bullet ricochets, injuring Kyoka, and she begins bleeding out. The parallel Toru hacks their time machine and sends himself to 2015. Upon seeing this, Remy flies into a rage and follows him. Toru, Eren, and Ludmilla follow Remy where they see him absorb an energy cube into himself, which gives him an outburst of power enough to fend off 4 different parallel enemies. However, the power is too much for him and he begins to suffer from degradation. A timekeeper appears just as a wave of dust spreads from where Remy once stood. Kyoka awakens, having survived her injuries. Meanwhile, Kyoma monitors the situation from afar. Toru then sees a vision of his parents which disturbs him and he runs away. He meets Kyoka, but he correctly suspects that she is not the real Kyoka, as the entity begins transforming its body into those who have died, including Shizune and, to Toru's horror, his mother. He continues to run as the dust continues to engulf him in the city, and he is constantly haunted by visions of his parents along the way. Kyoka catches up to him and shows him the futility of fighting, as all things will end with his death along with everything that has already died. He collapses in Kyoka's arms and wakes up as a child, sleeping on Kyoka's lap. He flips through a sketchbook where he sees the girl's "help me" message. The girl then appears before him and they finally have a chance to talk. The girl explains that the dust tornado is a dead end, and that an energy cube does not simply power up objects, but rather accelerates them towards the future, hence the futuristic appearance of some of their weaponry. When Remy took the energy cube into him, the cube merely accelerated his future to where he would become dust, as is the current fate of all humans. The girl shows Toru where everything began, starting with the Heliopause, where they found the technology necessary to mass produce the energy cubes. The cubes were used for military applications, and when the interdimensional machine was created, war ensued. She then explains the concept behind Dead End. The energy cube accelerates a weapon until it becomes perfect. That is, it is self-learning, self-replicating, and can utilize, analyze, and repel all forms of energy. The result is a sand-like form that devours those it conquers, a truly unstoppable force. She also reveals the truth behind the Timekeepers. They are the accumulated psyche of all that have perished due to the Dead End, and their goal is to go into the past to kill those who originally worked on the energy cubes, preventing the Dead End from ever happening. Her purpose in coming into the past was to prevent this from ever happening, but the Timekeepers interfered, leaving her unable to communicate with Toru until now. The energy cubes are linked to the Timekeeper's future, so using it would simply accelerate a person into the Dead End state. But the Gilly says that with her powers she can undo that link. The Timekeeper appears and attempts to dissuade Toru from trusting the girl, but Toru puts his trust into her and hands her an energy cube, but she begins to disappear. Both sides are faced with the awesome power of Remy's Dead End, unable to do anything to stop it, and the parallel Jonathan is killed. Toru reemerges, who comes bearing a plan. The two sides agree to a temporary ceasefire while Brian analyzes the purified energy cube that Toru sent. That night, both sides regroup and rearm themselves. Matsurika comforts Jonathan, who is affected by seeing the death of his parallel self, while Toru receives a call from Kyoka, and they promise to go to school together again in the future. The next day, the two sides hold a briefing. Remy has become the core of the Dead End, and if left alone, will soon end up affecting the temporal axis, or the fabric that holds together spacetime. This will also end up affecting the shadow space, or the space in between worlds that they have been fighting in all along in 2015. Though their initial plan is to eliminate Remy as quickly as possible, Toru wants the opportunity to attempt a rescue first, which his parallel self agrees to. They begin the operation, refusing to be pawns of the timekeepers. However, Remy summons waves of Zai, his adoptive android caretaker, and the two sides are soon overwhelmed. Many are forced to retreat. Kusakage is killed and both Rikandos perform a suicide attack to fend off a wave of Xyz. This alarms Kumi as she did not anticipate such a quick pace of casualties. The real Zai travels to 2015 and tries to free Remy by self-destructing, but even her death fails to penetrate the protective shell around him. Toru then uses his purified guns, which successfully frees Remy, ending the dead end, and leaving behind a massive energy cube in the sky. However, Brian realizes that they can no longer contact the time axis of 2015, with both sides now presumably trapped. The timekeeper appears to Toru and taunts him, admitting that although this event was a failure, he and the others will surely make another dead end of their own accord. Toru and Remy are forcibly extracted from 2015 and are returned to the Melchizedek Corporation. However, he is immediately seized and thrown into a cell where he is greeted by Brian, but Toru is surprised to see him together with his parallel self. The two Brian owners explain that after Toru and his parallel self switched places, they were able to communicate with each other and both began planning a way to fight back against the timekeepers. However, when Toru returned with the purified energy cube, their plans changed. The cube is capable of advancing humanity 100 years, or in the parallel Brian's term, evolve humanity, a fact with which they thank Toru for. But they reveal that for this to succeed, they must eliminate all those capable of surviving time travel, including Kiyoma. Brian explains that Kiyoma's recklessness thus far is a threat to their operations against the timekeeper. With the purified energy cube, they are now capable of manufacturing as many energy cubes as they wish, and soon they have no need to fear the timekeepers. Kumi informs Olga of what is happening and frees Toru from his cell, and he fights his way through the facility. He reunites with Kumi, and she explains that Brian was spiteful that Kiyoma was in charge and sought to have the energy cubes for himself to evolve humanity. Toru grits his teeth, saying that it is exactly thinking like that leads to the dead end. Kumi begins guiding Toru throughout the facility, hacking the cameras to hide his movements, but Brian realizes the deception after seeing an inconsistency in Ludmila's hospital room. He sends soldiers over to Ludmila's room, and she is killed. Kiyoma and Eren make their way to the exit point and Toru reunites with Kyoka. Toru and Kyoka manage to escape where Olga is there to retrieve them, and they learn of Ludmila's death. She brings them to one of her safe houses where they recuperate from their injuries. Olga teases them not to do any tiring activities, much to his embarrassment. While Toru sleeps, he sees the memories of the girl he was chasing. She was a prodigy that developed the energy cubes for medical applications, but the military soon catches wind of her activities and they use her technology for the use of weapons, which soon reaches the rest of the world, and a global war ensues. Wanting to stop this from ever happening, she travels back into the past, but the timekeeper's interference prevents her voice from reaching anybody. Toru then sees a vision of her, who instructs him to go back to where he first saw her. The next day, Toru, Kyoka, and Olga make their way to a second safe house deep underground, where they reunite with Remy, Eren, Matsurika, and Kiyoma. They plan to kill Brian and destroy his time machine, while Kiyoma has an unknown plan to defeat the timekeepers, using an energy cube. Toru and Kyoka go on a date at an artificial lake and the two eventually kiss. Kyoka asks about Toru's time in the parallel world and says it is a world where everyone is trying their best to live and survive. Olga infiltrates the Melchizedek Corporation and assassinates Brain, while the parallel Toru and Kyoka likewise kill the Brian owner of their world. Meanwhile, the rest of the group travel to the road where Toru first saw the girl, and they find that the equations she had written on the ground is the Primrose Equation. The basis of time travel and portal is open below them. They jump in one by one until only Toru and Kiyoma remain. Kiyoma says he has yet to acknowledge Toru as the man for Kyoka, and he asks him to prove himself, to which Toru says he will. Toru jumps down into the portal as the final battle for humanity begins. Remembering his past of suffering, the parallel Toru resolves to take back the future with his own hands. Toru and the rest of his group arrive in 2015 where the giant energy cube from Remy's dead end still resides. They spread out to find their parallel selves and are soon attacked, but they do not fight back. Toru tells his parallel self his plan. They are using their energy cube to forcibly access the world of the timekeepers and defeat them themselves, but without the other energy cube they do not have enough power to completely break through. Although hesitant at first, the parallel Toru agrees to the ceasefire, and the two sides work together. The two Kumis work together to complete the portal, and they send both tourists through the portal to the timekeeper's world. Toru meets the timekeeper in a vision, who questions why he struggles, as humans will eventually all die regardless of their actions. Through their plan, they will eliminate all pain and suffering, but Toru refuses their reasoning, and he wishes to continue fighting. The parallel Toru, too, meets the Timekeeper, who shows him visions of his past where he was unable to save his friends and comrades. The Timekeeper reasons that if he allows the dead end to happen, then the deaths of his friends would never come to pass. However, the parallel Toru dispels his uncertainties and refuses to accept that future, calling such a world an illusion. The two Taurus eventually arrive at the Timekeeper's domain. Toru goes to the target point, while his other self stays behind to deal with waves of Xyz. Harnessing the remaining power of the energy cube, Toru fires at the Timekeeper, but it's insufficient to break through her barrier. However, the parallel Toru appears and fires as well, and the Timekeeper is finally killed. The girl appears and thanks them for saving the future, and the two return to 2015. However, the parallel Toru is still intent on using the massive energy cube, confident he can avert the threat of another dead end, and Toru takes it upon himself to stop him. The two begin their duel, although they are evenly matched at first. The parallel Toru's blast overpowers Toru, and he is sent tumbling into the building below, heavily injured. Meanwhile, everyone outside has agreed to a ceasefire, content to allow the two Taurus to represent them, but the two Kyokas rush to their respective Taurus side. The two Taurus find themselves battling in the same building they fought in the first time they met. Toru tries to dissuade his parallel self from using the energy cube as it would create another dead end, but his other self, who is aware of the risks, wants to use it anyway. Toru says that gradual, steady change can be achieved even without the use of an energy cube, but the parallel Toru refuses to listen. When Toru is knocked down, the parallel Toru charges another massive attack, but when the two Kyokas enter the crossfire, he hesitates, but the parallel Kyoka accepts her fate, and he fires, seemingly killing them all. However, Kyoka's shields are strong enough to defend them, and the parallel Toru demands that parallel Kyoka kill Toru, but she refuses. Toru then fires at the energy cube, destroying it. The two Kumis realize that the destruction of the cube has caused their two worlds to separate, causing them all to disappear one by one to return to their own world. As the two sides say their farewells to their counterparts with whom they have developed respect for, the two pairs of Kyokas and Taurus embrace and everyone turns to dust. Toru finds himself with the girl and learns that her future was saved by his actions. She apologizes that her actions may have been selfish, and if Toru had wished, he could have used the energy cube to see his parents again. But he says that the only thing you can do is keep moving forward. As she does not remember her name, she asks Toru to name her, so he calls her Miki, another reading for the word future, in commemoration of the future she showed him worth fighting for. They return to their own time, and Toru and Kyoka plan to get married someday. It is revealed that Miki was the granddaughter of Toru and Kyoka all along, and they reunite in the end. And this brings the anime to an end. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on another video. Until next time, take care.